Hello and welcome to the Power Lunch crew in the room. Today's theme is bridging the rural-urban divide and how we run strong everywhere. And we certainly are going to be running strong today because we got a great lineup of guests who understand this issue of the rural-urban divide because they've lived it, they've researched it, they've run for office in it. And then we have somebody all the way she's in rural Virginia. She's going to be running the whole pipeline. So she's running strong along it to call attention to some of the issues that the rural areas are experiencing. So let's welcome everybody. We have Anthony Flaccavento, expert on rural issues, and he's also a former congressional candidate in CD9, and CD9 covers a big part of Southwest Virginia. Welcome, Anthony. And
Glad
then,
to be here.
yeah, thank you. So good to see you. Your program was so good last week, so we're so grateful that you're here today. And all the way from Montana, in a different part of the country, we have research scholar here with us, Kal Munis. Kal, welcome. So glad to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope we didn't startle you too much. I'm glad you're here, and we're really looking forward. You've written, co-authored Gone Country, Why Democrats Need to Play in Rural America, and how they can do it again. So welcome, glad you're here. And we got some awesome badass rural candidates in the room. We have Jennifer Kitchen. Jenny, glad to see you, girl.
Hey, y'all.
Yeah, we have Annette Hyde. Hello, Annette's at the beach. Okay, thank you, Annette.
Thanks for having me.
And Mark Downey's here. Hey, Mark.
Hello, everyone.
All right. And then Beverly Harrison ran for office, and she'll be joining us in a little bit. She'll talk about all her experiences running as a candidate as well. And then we have good friend Eleanor Roy from the Impact Center. Hello, Eleanor.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to see you. And then, of course, we'll have Mercedes Walter here to talk about the pipeline protest run that she's doing. All right. So everybody, a shout out first. You know how we love to shout out to the Power Lunch team. We have the ambassador of Buzz, Stair Calhoun, big boss at Network Nova.
Hello, all.
Look at
Welcome.
her, badass. Are you picking some corn back there? What are you doing?
Yeah, I am. Getting corn, doing my garden.
I know you love to garden. And then, of course, show wizard Robin from Postcards for Virginia. Hey, girl, you're looking good.
There.
Like your scarf against that background. Looks good. All right. And then we have the show maker, MC, Krista Jones from Vote Lead Impact. Hey, Krista, how you doing today?
Good. How are you doing, Catherine?
Good. I'm doing good. So thank you for being here. So let's get to it. It's great to have you all in the room today. And I want to also, it's always really important to thank all the supporters in the room, our early backers, right? And our crew that has become a patron of the show by subscribing. So we hope that maybe if you support our work, you could subscribe too. So just for the cost of a cup of coffee. So we hope you think about that and subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on Twitter. Robin, if you can put that all in the chat. So Krista, let's get things started. You know, today is National Take Our Daughters and Sons to Work Day, which is kind of interesting for Zoom world. And it's also National Talk Like Shakespeare Day. And one thing Shakespeare did was coin a lot of phrases that 500 that people didn't know about. One, he has said, an important phrase for I want you to talk about, a Daniel has come to judgment. And I think we saw this week history-making event where, yes, Daniel was brought to judgment. The jury did a verdict. It was historical. I would like you to talk about that.
Absolutely. You know, there's a lot of mixed emotions, I think, for people. A lot of people are saying it's not truly justice, but I think we can all agree that it's definitely a step in the right direction. A lot of people were surprised just because we've been so used to in the US, you know, police getting immunity for things that appear to be obviously very, very wrong and not how we want it to be. But I know we were talking about an article earlier where a police officer gave an opinion in the Washington Post saying, you know, it's time for us to start on an individual level as police and also stop and think. And I think that's huge because I think I don't come from any type of police background in my family, but when we see this, we think, well, why don't they just take a second to like think about what they're doing before they act? Obviously, we know it's high pressure, but I think this is a step in the direction to great police reform.
Yeah, I mean, finally, I think there is some kind of shift that goes on, and we always are grateful when we see those shifts. So, you know, we definitely wanted to give that a mention today, and lot going on. So we got a lot of guests today. So let's get right to it and bring Anthony on up. And Anthony, I know you have a great program today, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time like I was telling everybody how great you are, but you are a wonderful expert on this area. You're a prolific writer and author. You have spent 30 years working on this and living it. So I am just going to turn it over to you so you can really tee it all up. And thank you for being here.
Oh, so glad to be here. Thanks so much, Catherine. And thanks to Stair and to Robin and everybody else. Let me just double check real quick. Can everybody see my slide?
Yep.
Okay, terrific. Well, I have a lot of slides and I'm going to just charge through them at breakneck speed because that's what I need to do to cover this territory. So bear with me, hold on to your seats. What we're going to do here is talk about the question of why we have this rural-urban divide and then what we can do about it. But first, I want to begin by acknowledging that throughout all of this rural-urban divide work, like everything else, race and racism are an absolute key part. What I want to suggest is that while we know it's very true of many of the rural communities that we live in and work in, the fact of the matter is it's true for all of our communities. That's just the history that we have. And if we read through Stamped from the Beginning or Caste or The Color of Law, we see how deeply embedded it is in every facet of our life. The other little caveat I want to give before I jump into the content is I want to ask everybody, because there's a lot of strong feelings about folks who voted for Trump, people in rural red areas, like what the heck is wrong with these people? And what I want to suggest is that people in Trump country, so-called, do have a greatly exaggerated sense of grievance, but at the same time, they have real and long-standing grievances that just haven't been addressed. There may well be disproportionate rage, but there's plenty of reasons that folks have to be angry, legitimate reasons. And no question, white privilege is something that us white folks have and is quite common in rural areas. But at the same time, many rural folks see none of the trappings of white privilege. So let's try to keep that balance in mind. So how did we get here? I've condensed a much longer presentation into a smaller thing. So I'm going to hit 4 reasons how we got here. The first is just that the economy has not worked for the bottom 80% of Americans. That's the folks who've seen stagnant wages, job loss, and increasing economic security. Over the last 40 years since Ronald Reagan, the economy has grown 5 times faster than the population. That should mean, if we had any kind of equitable distribution at all, that generally speaking, people are better off, but in fact, generally speaking, people are worse off. And the point that I want to make is that we can't blame these bad economic fortunes entirely on Republicans. There's certainly blame for them, but we've had our own leaders to do things like eliminate the Glass-Steagall Act and embrace Wall Street. We've had very lukewarm until the present enforcement of antitrust laws. And so these kinds of things have made it really difficult for so many rural areas as well. Rural areas have seen since the recession, according to the Center for American Progress, no net new increases in business, 0 over the last 12 years. So that comes down to the fact that we have a lot of problems throughout the economic system, but in rural areas, they're more acute. The problem of corporatization, of monopolization is a problem in every economic sector, but in rural areas, our economies tend to be much less diverse than they are in urban areas. And so as a result, corporate concentration really hits hard in the ag system, for instance. But it's not just in agriculture. In fact, most of the major rural industries have seen decline over the last 20 to 30 years, including steep job loss in the timber industry, dramatic job loss in coal mining jobs in Southwest Virginia and throughout Appalachia, and then in places like Southside Virginia, loss of furniture factories, textile plants, and many others. So this economic decline, this increasing insecurity has created a foundation that has led to a widespread sense of neglect and betrayal. That's just something that we have. And it's enumerated brilliantly in these two books, Arlie Hochschild's Strangers in Their Own Land and Jennifer Silva's We're Still Here. From both of those books, there's much more to them than these things, but what they document through thousands and thousands of hours of conversations with rural people is the sense of being displaced, of being passed by, and then turning that sense of displacement into blaming others for butting in line. So it has fueled this culture of grievance, this anger and outrage, and it's also done something else. It's made people even more skeptical of government. And so many of the people who would perhaps benefit a lot from government action actually see no hope in the government solving their problems. Instead, they either turn inward or to family, local churches, things like that. Part of, again, this sense of betrayal is that regulations don't work. This is across the board, people feel this, but particularly around environmental regulations and worker safety regulations. The Upper Big Branch mine in southern West Virginia blew up 11 years ago now, and 29 men were killed in that. The regulatory piece of that is the fact that in the month before the explosion, there were over 60 safety citations issued by state regulators. In the year before the explosion, there were over 500 citations of safety violations, and yet nothing changed of substance. And so the takeaway for many people is regulations didn't save my husband or my brother or my community member. The third element based on that sense of alienation comes this widespread anger against elites. And the elites, in the definition of most rural conservatives, rural people, are us, city people, people with a good bit of formal education, intellectuals, academics, and liberals and Dems. And this sense has along with the extreme mastery of the right and their language, has fostered what Catherine Kramer calls a politics of resentment in her great book by that same name. Catherine absolutely acknowledges that racism is deeply embedded in this resentment, in this sense of losing our country. But she also admonishes us that if we don't fully understand that, that's also tied in with fundamental calculations of injustice. In other words, people feel like they've been wronged, and it's true. And so these two elements are interconnected in a way that a lot of country people simply feel that people like them and their places just get constantly overlooked and disrespected. There's one more element about this sense of being left behind, and this sense of elites, comes down to occupations and the fact that many people in the country feel that physical jobs, manual labor, farming, construction work, mining work, all of that is really now dissed, that the preferred occupation, what people are told they must do is get a college degree, and that those are the better jobs, the superior jobs. Well, let's see if I can get back to that. Yeah, so anyway, that led to this sense of one gentleman saying about educated urban elites that he told Jennifer Silva, if they're so educated, when their car breaks down, why don't they fix it? So there's this sense that, we do work that takes thought and intelligence too, but it doesn't get acknowledged as such. And then the last underlying cause I'll name before I switch to solutions is the reality that in so many ways, we Democrats, liberals, progressives have too often played into this narrative. First of all, with just a movement away from working class people towards basically elites, educated elites, tech elites. Larry Summers admitted that displaced rural white workers simply weren't on the radar screen of the Democrats because they were about a cosmopolitan elite. And then the second element that has helped foster this this anger and this sense of elitism is our own language, too often coming from our own leaders, our media leaders, our economic leaders like Paul Krugman. Erica Edelson, in her book, The Language of Contempt, says these are the voices of ordinary conservatives. She's talking about people who are feeling this frustration and this anti-elitism, not right-wing operatives. And they're beaming us a very urgent message, whether it's labeling them bigots or denigrating their lifestyle, religion, or intelligence. Liberal contempt is helping to bring the long simmering culture war to a rolling boil. We have two real-time examples, I would say, in our own experience. We have the fact, and you may have different opinions on this particular piece of legislation, but the Democratic majority-led House turned down an education equity funding bill. And then Delegate Mark Sickles, speaking for that majority, said of rural areas like Lee County, people need to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, when in places like Lee County, there's just about no bootstraps left. And so that led the Bristol Herald Courier to title its editorial, "House Democrats Turn Their Backs on Rural Virginia." And we have another example where we successfully eliminated, with Democratic leadership, the coal severance tax. This is a tax that was long overdue, wasn't productive, it wasn't creating jobs, but it was a significant revenue stream in rural coal counties. And when that tax was eliminated, there was no corresponding legislation to make up for the lost funds that these coal communities have sustained. So what do we need to do moving forward? Well, it's complicated and there's a lot of creative things going on, but I've been framing this as we need to think differently, we need to act differently, and we need to talk differently. In the thinking, there's a lot to it, and I hope that some of you will read the Urban-Rural Divide guidebook I've assembled, because that will really help you with your understanding. But the most basic thing is that we have to recognize that so many rural people feel that the economy and the government have failed them, and that the liberal culture, generally speaking, disrespects them, and they're basically right. That has to be our starting point as we try to better understand. And we also need to understand that over time, this group has come to see government as the problem. And so when we lead in conversations with the government as the solution, more government programs, even if they may be good ideas, it shuts the door for many people because of the extreme distrust of government. We have to find another way about it. We also need to find a new way of talking about the environment. Liberals in the environmental movement tend to talk about protecting the environment, preserving the environment. And of course, there's critical elements of that. But for many rural folks, the environment is about livelihood. How do we get what we need from the environment? And protecting the landscape means working the landscape, not preserving it away from human activity. Second element is around acting differently. And if you accept the fact that there is this grave, deep, wide mistrust, which there is, whether we've fostered it or the Fox News has fostered it, it's there, then our actions need to start by rebuilding trust, as we tried to do in Southwest Virginia when we helped hundreds of tobacco farmers start doing something other than tobacco, like organic produce. We have a small group in Southwest Virginia that are trying to work on this idea of community-led solutions as a way of changing the narrative. And some are talking about the possibility of doing what they've done in West Virginia and Kentucky, starting a pharmacy program. A local independent Democratic committee or a progressive group. Pharmacy programs are where healthcare professionals literally write prescriptions for local produce. It ends up helping local farmers by buying their stuff, and it helps lower income people eat better. It's an amazing little program, an example of a way that we can put our values to work and perhaps begin to change perspectives. And the other way of acting differently in the second category is around the policies that we promote. And Ian Haney Lopez has a wonderful approach to this. He's not the only one, but what he calls the race-class fusion. And he's tested messages around that. And he's found that strong, direct messages, not wishy-washy messages, when they put race and class together, are very, very well received by people in the so-called middle, the persuadable group. Heather McGee talks about this in her amazing book, The Sum of Us, as the solidarity dividend. And she cites that the plutocrats, the people driving this economic concentration, know that solidarity is a threat to them and that they need to do everything they can to make sure that white people don't empathize with people of color and vice versa. And the last thing, and then I'm going to wrap it up and turn it over to the next person, is how we talk about it. As Erica Edelson said, there's too much contempt so often in our language, but it's not just that. I've come out with 4 ground rules or guiding principles for communicating in the countryside. First is we just have to talk less, get to the point, and listen more. The second is we need to use real world examples, explain and ground our ideas. The third is just to try to avoid the talking point thing, the jargon that we are so embedded in, and think about talking like a neighbor rather than an activist. And then lastly, wherever possible, use concrete examples in particular situations rather than abstractions and generalizations. So that's my little bit of a tornado of a presentation.
Oh my gosh. No, don't go away yet.
Okay.
This is a conversation, so
Yeah, I'm sticking around.
stick around for the after chat, but you did in 20 minutes, the people in this room, I think it's the first time we sat quiet and and listened. So much good information. And when I looked at your district and you ran for office back in 2012, 2018, and wasn't successful, but you did, obviously, this is where your groundwork, where you just really became interested in what the heck is going on. And we lost that seat, in 2012 to Griffith. Yes. Is that so? Even then, we saw this. This is just not a new thing. This has been building, correct?
Yes. Oh, yeah. It's been going on for a while. It kind of culminated in 2012 when Rick Boucher
right.
got beaten. But the other trends about how of perception and the sense that they've been betrayed, that had been building for a good 20 years by that point.
Right. Well, I know that's what I found so interesting, that Rick Boucher served 14 terms out there as a Democrat, and we see this flip. So so glad to have your insight, and I'm sure our guests will like those takeaways, because we've been talking a lot about how we do have to message. We're going to be doing a lot of work, and I think your advice was very, very astute, talking less, listening more, and how we message and how we talk about this. So appreciate it, Anthony. Stick around. And next up, I would love to welcome Kal Munis from all the way from Montana. Kal, how are you doing? Right, that's Annette, unless we got a different change. Hey, Kal, how are you?
Good, doing well and happy to be here.
So glad to have a conversation with you about this. And from Gone Country, the research you wrote. So tell us, in your mind, what after listening to Anthony and your research, the takeaways from what really is this divide we're talking about, and how is it important to us as Democrats, also politically, and how we keep our, how we make sure that we're able to keep the party going strong.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. So first, I just want to say I really enjoyed the presentation by Anthony. I think I co-signed nearly everything, probably everything in the presentation. And I appreciate the shout out to Catherine Kramer too. She was on my dissertation committee, and yeah, everyone should read that book, Politics of Resentment. But in terms of why people should care about this, I think it's most sort of obvious when you're looking at the national landscape, right? Democrats have majorities, right, across the country in terms of people who are voting for them, but it's very difficult for Democrats to translate those majorities into governing majorities because so much of Democratic support is concentrated in urban areas, suburban areas. And this also plays out in the state legislatures as well, just due to the nature of, right, how our districts are drawn. It's difficult. Even with a friendly Democratic state legislative map, right? It's very difficult because of how intensely concentrated our voters are, right, for those voters to be spread across multiple districts. So this is a big issue for people to start taking seriously.
I just want to ask you, is it from the start of our country, meaning the way that they have done the agricultural, I mean, how did this, I'm just interested in your look at this, like that those populations that have less people in them have more power, right? I mean, really, we have more people, but our majority voice isn't being heard. I'm just saying that in the sense of what you're saying about electoral power. And that sort of stands out to me, that we're struggling, even though we're getting more votes and all that, you know what I mean, with that power.
Yeah, I mean, so these are the electoral institutions that we have, right? I mean, we live in a federalist country. We have, right, states, these things called states, and senators, 2 senators per state. And like this is the institutional groundwork that we're working in. And while that might seem unfair in some sense to people, like, I mean, you know, that's that is the political battlefield that we're on. I'm sort of, pardon my that particular metaphor, but yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we need to sort of take that seriously, and that's not going to change anytime soon. And so, you know, now the onus is on us to figure out, well, how do we right, win given this system that we have. And I think to Anthony's point, a large part of this boils down to communication and the way that we present ourselves to voters. So I think, you know, something that I would note is that whether we like it or not, and whether we think that there's, you know, whether we agree that this should be the case, the reality is that first of all, American politics is nationalized.
Right.
And given that the National Republican brand at this moment, and the way that it is being presented, is just a superior brand in rural areas than is the Democratic brand. And a lot of that has to do with the communication styles.
Right.
As Anthony mentioned, you know, I think part of the problem in terms of how the urban-rural divide is blown open over the last several decades is that Democrats have, in their messaging, become too sort of insular and too focused on sort of appealing to a sort of cosmopolitan, urban, well-educated elite, and that is extremely off-putting.
Right.
In rural areas, but not just rural areas, but small metro areas. I mean,
Right.
Democrats have really been performing well and increasingly well in the largest metro areas, but that's in particularly the top 20 largest metro areas across the country. But even in your smaller cities, that hasn't, you know, you haven't seen that same parallel trend. I mean, and it's been radically the opposite in rural areas.
So just to sum it up, I know we've talked about communications. I mean, just to wrap it up, is that your big takeaway is in your, you know, the Gone Country paper that you did, you had some takeaways. What would be, if you had one thing to leave everybody with today that you would want to stress? Because sometimes we always hear like what we do wrong. Democrats do this wrong. We do this wrong. Well, it's like, you know, I don't want to really think that way. I want us to figure out, well, okay, what do we need to do? And what does the Republicans need to do? Stop disinformation, stop calling us socialist and Marxist. I mean, so it's like, we're really up against this big media center. We're up against disinformation. We're up against, you know, this. So what do we do about it? What would you recommend? And then I'm curious.
Yeah, so my 3 main recommendations is, you know, if the politics is nationalized and the national brand isn't, the National Democratic brand isn't particularly savory in rural areas, well, then it's incumbent on the candidates to localize their messages.
Like that, okay.
And there's a few different aspects of that. But, you know, the main thing is that, just be creative. There are lots of issues out there that are very important to your voters on the ground, the people that you are hoping to represent, that are not part of the national partisan discourse right now. And find those, raise the salience of them, right? Champion those issues so that you can show, yeah, you're not just another national Democrat, right? And you're a Virginia Democrat or a Southwest Virginia Democrat, and that's distinct from a San Francisco liberal or a Brooklyn liberal or whatever.
Not to interrupt you, but sometimes I feel like that's, like Anthony ran the most amazing campaign, organic farmers, soul of the earth, everything, and still really realized that that was really, really hard to win. And we need to get in there and do those community projects, almost, really show our values. Would you agree with that also?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, we can point to Anthony's strong campaigns and say, well, he lost. But on the other hand, right, I think Stacey Abrams's efforts in Georgia show that, yeah, you're probably going to lose for a little while, but ultimately, you make progress. And also, in Anthony's district, that's just one district, right? I mean, if Democrats are doing this systematically across the board, this is going to help cut down margins, and that's especially going to help candidates running at the statewide level. And so, this the effects of this sort of go up the ballot, down the ballot, and it helps you build a movement moving forward into time, because you can't change the Democratic brand or what people's stereotypes of Democrats are overnight. It takes time.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I hope you stay in the room and stay afterwards. And it's really been great having you. And we will I think somebody put your paper link to it so people can read it more in depth. But we appreciate it. And I'd like to call up Krista to take on the candidates. And candidates listening to this, I know that Jenny Kitchen and Annette Hyde and Beverly and Anthony have all incorporated they understand this better than anybody. Bringing in the local issues and working on that. So I'll let you talk, this lovely crowd of people we have.
Yes, I'm excited to talk to all of our rural candidates today. We have Jenny Kitchen in HD 25. We have Annette Hyde in HD 30. We have Mark Downey in HD 96. And also, is Beverly with us?
Yeah.
Beverly Harrison. Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us. Let's dive right in. That was a lot of great information that we just heard from Anthony and Kal, but like Catherine said, you all know this all too well. So I'd love for you to start off, just each of you telling us a little bit about your race and then how you feel like you're able to approach some of the topics that we just talked about, whether it's going local and against the national stereotype of Democrats, or fighting against elitism. How are you all doing these, and do you see it in your district? So we'll start with you, Jenny.
So I'm running for the 25th district, which is parts of Albemarle, Augusta, and Rockingham County, and gerrymandering was brought up earlier. So this district goes from western Albemarle to the West Virginia line without including any of Charlottesville, Stanton, Waynesboro, or Harrisonburg. So, and yes, I want to thank everybody that has spoken. I agree with everything. I'd also like to add a book to everyone's reading list, which is Harvest the Vote by Jane Cleave. And it talks a lot about how the Democratic Party realized that they didn't need rural votes to win, and so they left us behind. And it gives a lot of tools for how we need to get back into these communities and foster these relationships. And that's a lot of what I've been working on and will continue to work on. I'm also the chair of the Augusta County Democratic Committee, and we see it a lot on the committee level as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. Annette, how about you? Tell us about your district, your race, and what you're seeing in reference to what we've been talking about earlier.
Well, I'm Annette Hyde. I am the Democratic candidate for House District 30. My district includes Madison County, where I live, all of Orange County, and most of Culpeper County. My opponent is Delegate Nick Freitas, who had spent last year running for Congress against Abigail Steinberger. In 2019, I ran for the state senate against Emmett Hanger and became very good friends with Jenny Kitchen and Beverly Harrison during that race. I totally agree with Anthony and Jenny's perspective. In fact, I was having a conversation yesterday with a business owner in Culpeper, and he says you're going to have a lot of difficulty bringing this message that government is to help people because they've seen lack of funding for the public schools. They've seen, if they've been to a VA medical center or a VA hospital, the lack of funding there and the poor service they've received. And so it's a very big hill to climb as far as that messaging is concerned. But the one thing that is happening in my district is there are a lot of people from Northern Virginia that are moving, especially into Culpeper County because of the housing prices, and you get a lot more for your money and a lot more land. And there's beginning to be a lot of pushback from the natives because they're bringing their ideas, they're bringing the stress on the infrastructure, and it means their taxes are going to go up. So it's not only happening in Culpeper, it's happening in Madison, it's happening in Orange because of the people that are moving in from urban areas.
So just quickly, how are you addressing that?
How I'm addressing that is we need to change a lot of the things that are happening in Richmond. And that's why people like Jenny and Mark and I are doing this again, because as Anthony said in his presentation, that quote from Delegate Mark Sickles about people in Lee County is like, well, you should just pull up your bootstraps. Well, in our districts, as he said, there's no more bootstraps to pick up. And for instance, in Madison County, they're having to raise the real estate tax again another penny because there's 13,000 people here in Madison County, yet they don't want business coming in here, or certain businesses. It's okay, like wineries and distilleries, it's great, come spend your money and leave. They don't want more people to come into the county because, again, that's going to stress their infrastructure, like their water and sewer and the public schools. In fact, there was an article in our paper yesterday that our water and sewer authority is in the midst of breaking up. And it's been an agreement between Greene County, Madison County, and Orange County for construction, maintenance, and distribution of the water and sewer. And since Greene County is expanding, they're wanting to pull out because they need to have their own water supply to meet the needs of their county.
Right.
The problem is with Madison County, they have the fewest people on that water and sewer authority, about 200 people, and those people are in the town of Madison. The biggest client is the Madison County Public Schools.
Wow.
And yesterday, Madison finally agreed to let Greene out, but on a stipulation that Orange has to stay in the authority for another 5 years.
Wow.
And you're talking about tens of millions of dollars having to be spent by a county of 13,000 people.
Absolutely.
Essentially only 250 people on a water and sewer line. So
Excellent.
yeah, that's the big thing in my county right now in the district.
Thank you, Annette. So Mark, tell us about your race and what your thoughts are about the previous speakers. How does it apply to your race?
Well, thank you, Krista, and thank you all for letting me join you today. I'm Dr. Mark Downey, a pediatrician from the 96th district, which is the two surrounding counties outside of Williamsburg, Virginia. So it's James City County and Upper York County. I ran in 2019, but I've lived in this district since age 2. So I think leaning into what Anthony said, talking to people as their neighbor. I've grown up in this community, went to all the local schools. I'm taking care of people's kids and grandkids that I went to school with. And, just on a daily basis, I get to see everyone in the community from all walks of life, all different political persuasions. And I think the other big thing is just, like I said many times, is listening and not feeling like you have to command the room. And I think that automatically kind of levels or lowers the temperature in the room. And that's what I did last time in 2019. I lost count of how many people said that I've never voted for a Democrat before, but I know you've taken care of my kids, my grandkids, we trust you. We know you care about the community because you've been part of it. And, just being present in the community. I've volunteered as a volunteer swim coach for the high school team, the summer league team. I've helping with my daughters and sons rowing club. And it just, it shows that authenticity, that you're not just here to promote yourself, you're here to really advocate for them. And my campaign really is focusing on the fundamentals. And I think that crosses all divides. I'm really focusing on making sure everyone has quality health care, quality mental health care, quality access to education and early childhood education, good paying jobs, good trade schools. I think that's another thing we can really emphasize in our rural communities is that, a plumber makes more than an English major right now. So we need to, promote that from middle school, high school on. So I think just, being out there, showing who you are, be willing to listen really carries a lot. And, in my last election, I flipped the district by 8 percentage points. I just need to take the next 6 percentage points to win it this year.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. And I wonder, you mentioned trade schools. I think that's interesting because as we were talking about earlier, the whole idea of the liberal Northeast educated Democrat, I wonder if that goes against that. And I wonder if we have a little bit of trouble in, integrating in that into our message. Not sure, but just thank you. I think that's an excellent point. Thank you for focusing on that. So Beverly, as we wrap up, I'd love for you to talk about this idea of the long game. Talk about your race, but talk about the idea of us running rural now for possibly many more gains in the future.
I'd be happy to do that. I ran in 2019 along with Mark and Annette and Jennifer, and we had one of the best things about rural candidates is they work together, and there's a real sense of solidarity and teamwork and growth, and that's part of the long game. Right now, I'm supporting Emily Scott. She's running this year. I'm definitely looking at potentially running again down the road because I think it's so important that we run every year, every race. And that's because over time we need to build the trust. They need to hear your name, see you in the community, see you with weird hair and makeup at Walmart, and oh, it's that lady who posted about vaccinations, or it's that person who said, and today I still keep a very active Facebook and Twitter presence, but it's now all about, it was before, but it's really all about here's food opportunities, minimum wage is being raised, all these other things, so that you show in your day-to-day actions year after year, I care about you, I respect you, you're relevant, I'm listening to you, you are my priority, and it doesn't matter whether or not I'm running, I'm here and I'm paying attention to you. I live in a very hostile district. When the original gun bills came out last year, we were one of the first to become a sanctuary. We had a county board of supervisors meeting of 30 that's normally attended by 30. It had 1,500 people. They were mostly protesters. And again, how you get past that is gaining trust, offering respect, and just this constant presence of, I am here for you now. Don't equate me with the National Democratic Party. Don't equate me with anybody else. Rural Dems are different. And over time and trust, that's how we get the larger majority, because people will come to see that you're not just a 9 months a year person, you're always authentic.
I love that, Beverly. Thank you so much. And thank you to you all. Thank you, Beverly Harrison. Thank you, Mark Downey with from HD 96. Thank you, Annette Hyde from HD 30. And thank you, Jenny Kitchen from HD 25. We wish you all the best of luck. And if you haven't already, please be sure to put in the chat how everyone can support you in your efforts. So thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Catherine.
All right. Okay. So, I mean, it's so interesting. Jenny, I hope you feel better. I know you had your vaccination. Get some rest. So when we at Network Nova, part of our work after that 2019 election was we wanted to go out and visit the candidates that ran out in these districts. We visited with, we did these power lunches. We actually traveled out and we sat down at the table with them and we really learned so much. And it was really humbling. And now years later, we're friends with a lot of these candidates. We built these relationships. And this team has really felt it's important to bring this real concerns into Nova, into our mindset so we understand it. Because I think once you understand it, then it's a way that it sort of just changes the way you look at the whole country and the whole world, I think. Like even the pipeline protests were going on. A lot of people aren't affected by that. But boy, is that a scar on Virginia, what we've been seeing, what the pipeline has done, taking people's lands. It was devastating to be a part of that. But a lot of us up here had no clue what was going on. And so we really thought, if we're going to be, Virginia's my district, we really need to support these candidates that stand up and run. And I'm going to say, I'm so grateful just to meet these awesome, first of all, they're awesome. They're fun, they're great. They're fun people. And it's expanded our whole relationship vision. And so bringing up the next guest is Eleanor. Eleanor, how are you? Eleanor Roy, we call you Elroy.
That's right. My friends call me Elroy, but you can call me Eleanor.
So what's interesting about continuing this conversation is we're talking about really how we can impact, how we can help these candidates to stand up and run. I think the biggest thing we hear when we sat at that table with them at lunch is that they felt forgotten by the Democratic Party of Virginia. I'm just going to call it out. They talk a good game, but when it comes down to it, they don't really get the support they need, or that's how they felt. That's what they said. And also, a lot of them run and they lose, but we win because of what they do and what they're building. But what you're doing at the Impact Center is that you're changing this, that you're putting out there, we're going to run strong everywhere, support these candidates. So tell us about what about yourself and what the Impact Center does and why this is so important to the Democratic Party in Virginia.
Absolutely. I first just want to say thank you to Network Nova for having us here today, and also for all of the work and advocacy that you guys do. You were a huge part of flipping Virginia blue in 2019, so we're just thrilled to be involved today. So I am campaigns director for the Impact Center, and I actually have a slideshow. So,
yeah, you remember just a few, because
just a few. I know they had me reel them in.
Elroy, so go ahead.
I'm just enthusiastic. So how do I, sharing my screen?
I think you can, your co-host, you can take it away, but go ahead and talk.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Tell us about you. You got involved in this work. Are you a Virginian?
I actually am from Florida originally.
Yeah, and hit the present slide so we see the whole screen. We can start.
There we go. All right.
There you go. Okay. Look how pretty that is. Okay. Run strong.
Isn't that
everywhere.
beautiful? I know.
It's beautiful. Let's go.
Some rolling hills. I know. It's lovely. So we are a PAC, and we're based in Roanoke out of the office of Delegate Sam Rasool, who is running for Lieutenant Governor, as I'm sure most of you know. So he launched the PAC in 2016 because he wanted to empower progressive candidates and also make sure that we're giving voters a choice in some of these rural districts where they haven't seen a Democrat in years. A good example of one of our Impact Center candidates from 2019 was Jennifer Woofter, who was running in my district.
Right.
And she, I think, was the first Democrat on the ticket for the House in decades. So it's really about showing up in these areas and making sure that people know that we haven't forgotten about them. There are Democrats among them, and you know, they have a choice when they're casting their vote. So I fit into this. I grew up in rural Florida, like I was just starting to tell Catherine. That is actually me, and that's how I spent most of my childhood, in a little wagon working in our garden with the dogs. So this is very near and dear to my heart. I started with Sam in 2019 as a legislative fellow and really got interested in the Impact Center. He has one rule, excuse me, with his office. And there we go. So it's helping as many people as possible. We do that through public policy, community development, and of course, changing politics, which is what the Impact Center falls under. So we're really coming in and taking a different approach to all of these different activist trainings and candidates. And let's see. So we do this a few different ways. We mostly focus on building trust and goodwill in these different areas. Like Beverly was saying, and like Anthony was saying, there's a lot of stereotypes about rural areas that we're trying to break. And we need to make sure that we're building coalitions across all of these different networks, and so we can work together. And like we were saying earlier, this is a long game, right? Even when we're running in districts and maybe we don't win a seat, we're still making people realize, hey, we need to talk about these rural issues, even if they don't affect everybody. So then,
yes.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was just saying, is that the candidate running? Is that one of the candidates running in that picture? Is that Bridget?
It is, and I think she's actually with us here right
Yay!
now.
Okay, so I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm like, that's a great picture, and I'm like, I think that's Bridget. Okay,
it is Bridget. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So this is a perfect example of storming, which is one of the things that is super difficult to train. But Bridget is a perfect example of that. So she found herself in the national spotlight because she took a picture last year with these two fellas. They're Rocky Mount police officers. And after January 6th, she saw some of the different videos, pictures coming out of the Capitol riot, and she recognized them and called them out publicly. These two fellas, I think they've since been arrested.
That's a scary slide.
Yeah. So these guys, you know, they've since been removed from the force, I understand. But Bridget really used that as an opportunity to raise awareness about all of the different activism that's going on in Rocky Mount. So she's been on the cover of the Washington Post. She's been featured in the New York Times. And she just has really used the moment to expand her platform. And that's what we call storming, embracing the storm, letting yourself get caught up in the storm. So now we have this small town in rural Virginia with a woman who hasn't run for office before. Bridget is a cosmetologist and owns a salon in Rocky Mount, and she's running for office against an incumbent who has been in office for 20 something years, I think. So this is a candidate who we're very, very excited about. She's in the district right next to mine, so it's very near and dear to my heart.
I'm going to give you, just so you know, Elroy, you have like a minute warning on it, because I want to make sure we get to the real meat of what we need to invest in these wide, you know.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
So shifting our tactics is really important when we're addressing these rural candidates, because obviously cutting turf doesn't look the same in Rocky Mount as it does in Fairfax County or Fairfax City. The media strategy is very different because they might not have reporters who stay in these areas, in these media markets for very long. And of course, there's not a lot of mechanisms that are in place in more populated areas like fundraising, donor lists, those sorts of things. So at the Impact Center, we're really working to eliminate those barriers and make sure that these candidates are getting the support that they need, and we're doing it in a ample amount of time.
Right.
So that is what we're all about. And it's important to remember that folks in rural areas want the same things as folks who are in more populated areas. We want clean air and water. We want our kids to go to good schools, and we want to have the same opportunities as everybody else.
Right.
So
No, and absolutely. And that's something we have to remember, because when talking to when we did the education roundtable, listening to the people in these rural areas and in the schools, and seeing the urban areas has similar problems with schools, rural issues have similar problems, but it's hard for funding for the rural areas. And that's what we have to understand, where these grievances will definitely come from. And then the work that you're doing to invest in candidates, and why I really wanted you to have on today, I'm so glad you came, and thank you for coming in, is that we've been telling candidates to call you. So there's candidates that need help, candidates that we should be there for these candidates. And I so admire that what you're doing at the Impact Center, and the candidates need you. So make sure you put your information in the chat, how to get a hold of you, because we have definitely tried to connect as many people that have needed help right to your center. So thank you for being here today, Eleanor. We really appreciate it.
thank you for having me.
Yeah, all right. Okay, next up is Mercedes. And Mercedes is here. How you doing, Mercedes? And this is exciting. Mercedes Walters, and you have a team of 2 other women that aren't here today. I'm just going to pitch it over to you and tell people what you are doing with this MVP protest pipeline run.
Sure. So it'll be myself and 2 other women running around 415 miles from Northwest West Virginia down to Virginia, right outside Roanoke, following the pipeline path, the Mountain Valley pipeline path. And so our aim is to protest the construction of the path, to raise awareness of not just the environmental impact, but also the community impact, and then raise funds that will go directly to POWER, which is Protect Our Water, Heritage and Rights, and the Monacan Indian Nation Foundation.
Nice. Now, it's funny, it just so happened this run came across my feed. I donated immediately, and it came across my feed because Kay Ferguson, who we had on before from Art Activism Virginia, is obviously just done incredible work around the Save Our Water and all the great work around Earth Day. That's how I found you. And I'm so glad you came, because it's not your first rodeo though. So tell me a little bit about you. I mean, and your experience in the rural community. Is this what makes you passionate? What really drives you right now with this?
Sure. So when I came to Washington, D.C. for grad school, and at that time, growing up, I was very much into the outdoors. I loved to be outside all the time. And so with grad school in D.C., DC has quite a few trails. And so I kind of found my love of trail running through that. And I've been an athlete my whole life. I went to University of Oregon on a soccer scholarship. So athletics kind of came naturally to me. And I found trail running as a way of mental health for me, just a way to release and get outside. And so naturally I gravitated towards Shenandoah National Park and the Blue Ridge Mountains, and just fell in love with trail running by spending time out in those mountains. And so I spent some time living in Wintergreen, Virginia. And while I lived out there, I found out about the Atlantic Coast Pipeline.
Right.
And so I had not heard about it in mainstream media. I hadn't heard about it. It felt like it was a local problem, not a national problem. And there had been no national spotlight on it. So I really wanted to participate in just protesting that and becoming more educated about it, because as a trail runner, we have the responsibility to look after the environment because we spend so much time on the trails. And so, I wanted to participate in that. And so I planned out a pipeline protest run to protest the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, where I was going to run from the beginning of Shenandoah National Park down to where the pipeline was going to cross the Appalachian Trail, right next to Wintergreen. And so lo and behold, like COVID happened, and then
Right.
the pipeline got canceled. And so
And the
I was just-
politics around that, right? I mean, the cancellation was, everybody was thrilled. There was a lot of work. We've had people
Right.
in this room on top of trees,
right.
doing protests, and actually there was like the voices were heard, and there was definitely a change there. But then everybody thought, oh, good, but oh, there's this MVP pipeline.
Right. Exactly.
So glad you're calling attention to. We have to wrap up, but I want to make sure that everybody in this room gives you at least $10. You need to meet. I know when we were last looking at your fundraising, you were still a little shy of your $6,000 goal. Have you reached it yet?
So we reached our $6,000 goal. Yes. And so we increased the amount to 10,000 because we have gotten a sponsorship from Patagonia. So they will be sharing our photos and our story across their platforms. And so we expect a wider range of involvement and exposure. So we're hoping to just increase that amount.
I hope you get cool gear.
Yeah, we got some gear.
I'm just saying, girl, if you're going to do, I'm a runner, or used to run a lot, not like you, like running 415 miles. Good gear is good gear. So hopefully you'll get that support. So thank you so much. And tell your team that, tell your team just good luck and all that. And let's just say, we will keep track of you. Maybe we'll track you on the power lunch, and we'll give everybody updates about how you're doing. So they
can find updates on our GoFundMe, which I'll put into the chat.
Just go ahead and put it right in the chat.
Yep, and we'll be updating that every day. We plan on doing 10 days of running, so we'll be updating that daily.
Okay, thank you, Mercedes. Well, I was just laughing because last year we did 11 days for our women's summit, so you're just as crazy as we are. So good for
Probably.
you. Good for you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, it's that time of day. It's 1:02. We're only 2 minutes over, but we just had such a great program today with all the world candidates, with Anthony Flaccavento, Kal Munis, and Mercedes here. And I don't know where my team is. I see a lot of hands up. Does that mean you want to ask questions, Jennifer? You're going to have plenty of time. We're going into the after chat. But before we do, I want to make sure that you guys know that you could become a patron of the show. Please, team, put the link in there. We'd love to get, for a cup of coffee, you can support us monthly. That'd be great. We work hard every week to put the show together. Much appreciated. So thank you to my team. Stay for the after chat. We're going to close out at 1:30 today because I have to go run around Virginia for my own race today. So let's hit the credits, and thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it.